This is Rabbi Ben-Zion Schaefer of the Shmooze.com. Jewish adulting is about shining a light on parts of ourselves in order to do Avodas Hashem with all the tools and resources at our disposal. It is an honor and a privilege to have every day to further refine our character and grow closer to Hashem. Take advantage of these opportunities before it's too late.
Hello, everybody. This is your host of the Jewish Adulting Podcast, Chedva Rose. I'm here tonight with Ann Koffsky, and Ann is an author and occasional illustrator of over 50 Jewish children's books. Her latest work is Ping Pong Shabbat from Little Bee Books. Other titles include Sarah Builds a School, a biography of Sarah Schneer from Menucha Publishing, and Kayla and Kogel series from Apple and Honey Press, which introduces the Chagim to young readers. Several of her books have been featured in PJ Library, and she has been recognized by the Association of Jewish Libraries for Noah's Swimathon, which is a great book, and resides in West Hempstead with her family. She also offers free Jewish-themed coloring pages on her website, which is annkofsky.com, and she can be followed on Instagram at Ann Koffsky, and I will be putting that all in the show notes. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Chedva. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so I feel like I have a new friend, and lest everyone on this podcast think that Chedva has it all together and nothing ever goes wrong with her podcast and they just smooth sailing all the way. Ann is my first real technical difficulties. We really weren't able to get it together last week, and we ended up making the adult decision to scrap it and do it again.
I feel honored. I was part of your journey of learning.
Yes, and we grew together. We trauma bonded over this IT situation, and now we're good friends. And she's going to invite me over for Shabbos with my family one day. So
any minute now. Next time you're on the island, for certainly we have to get coffee.
Yes, coffee for sure. And okay, so one of the things that I wanted to talk about was this is a podcast for adults. And so I think, Ann, your story of how you got into, being an author and an illustrator and how you were able to, produce the quantities that you have and, basically pursue a passion that a lot of people might say is like a pipe dream. And I thought this could be something that I really want to discuss with my audience. So I guess the first question I want to ask you is, can you share with us, the journey that brought you to this place where you became, how did you get to this place of the illustration, the author, the illustrator, the, basically the wild success that you're enjoying?
I appreciate you characterizing it that way. Thank you so much. So it's really interesting how you phrased that question, because it really was a journey besides, the business networking, getting editors, all the professional stuff. It really was a journey in my head as well, because like you said, it's not a typical path. It's it's the one profession that the adjective is starving. They describe artists as starving. Nobody describes brain surgeons or occupational therapists as starving occupational therapists, but they do say starving artist. And I started as an artist, and so the journey was kind of in my head of, yeah, you can do this, sure you can, and then just getting the confidence to be able to do the things to get me where I am now. So it just started as and I just love to draw. I started as an artist first, as an illustrator first, and then became an author. And the way that kind of happened with me is that ever since I was kindergarten, forever, I just loved to draw. And it was a real passion of mine. I filled notebooks with my drawings. I drew during all my classes. So you would have the notes in the middle of the pages, and on the margins were all sorts of creatures and pictures of my classmates and pictures of the teacher, respectful always, of course. But just, I love to draw. And when I got to college, when I went to Stern, and I said to myself, art is so impractical. I can't make that my career. But I'll minor in art because I love it so much, and I'll figure out my career for a major. So I took a bunch of minor courses and then I finished the minor and I said, oh, I don't want to be done. I'll major in art and then I'll go to a master's in something else. I'll go to law school or something. But I could just keep taking these art courses. And then by the time I graduated with my major, I'm like, I really like this art thing. I really like drawing. I really like telling stories with my art. So the genius thing about illustration is you don't really go to illustration school. You really make a portfolio and then you print a business card. And now you don't print business cards. Huh, that's so antique. Now you put up a website or an Instagram account and you start telling people, I am an illustrator. And that was a journey in my head also, like to say out loud, I am an artist. It's just like, you go to law school and then they give you a diploma at the end that says you're a lawyer, and you take the bar and it says you're a lawyer and you know you're a lawyer. But when you're an artist, you're not quite sure you're an artist because what makes somebody an artist? I don't know. But at a certain point, I could say with a straight face that I was an artist, that I was an illustrator, and I started showing my portfolio to people. And I had a little bit of success. I got some greeting card work, which is, some small jobs. And I would start to walk trade shows, which means I have to walk up to complete strangers and say, hi, I'm an illustrator. Would you like to see my artwork? I've brought it here in my portfolio. Again, an antiquated thing. Most people now are going to carry around an iPad, even if the trade shows even exist. Tech has changed so much since when I began. But anyway, so I went to a bunch of, I met at these trade shows, I would meet some people who make books, and I would very often hear from people, oh, we like your art. Very nice. We'll call you when we have a job. And then they wouldn't call because there's so many artists. They would never think to call me. They have to think, oh, I remember I met Anne and she had pretty teddy bears in her portfolio and we have a teddy bear book. Like there was so much thinking that I wasn't necessarily getting the call. So I said, what I need to do is write. Because if I write the story, I can go up to them and say, here, I have this story and you should have me illustrate it. So I kind of was like writing to get myself some illustration jobs. And that worked. There was a company called Schulsinger Judaica, which is now part of Right Life Judaica in Brooklyn. And I did a bunch of little board books and gift wrap and greeting cards for them. But the books I got from them because I wrote them. And now suddenly I was a writer. And so now today, that just built and built. And along the way, I joined writing groups and got critique from other writers. And now I sometimes write books that I don't even illustrate at all. Sometimes I'm the author, sometimes I'm the illustrator, sometimes I'm the author and illustrator on some of my projects. So it's really been very rewarding, and I'm really happy I took that journey in my head, that I'd be able to say, I am an author, I am an illustrator. Really.
Right. Right. So okay, so that was the Disneyland version of your story.
Mhm.
Where is the evil villain? What is it sounds right when you tell it like that, it sounds like the biggest obstacle was your own inner dialogue, your own sense of like, I need external validation to be an artist. I can't just call myself an artist. And then you overcame that obstacle and you were able to, and then they said they never thought of you forefront of your mind. And so, you have created, a supply and demand for your own art. So that's, brilliant. But what other obstacles did you encounter? Did you have, anybody naysaying you or anybody giving you negative feedback or anything of that nature?
Well, I think the obstacles are constant and continuous and still present today, and that is rejection. Because for every book that I've published, I've had way more rejections. And that's actually another journey in my head because, you have to learn and then at a certain point believe, and that takes me a while to get there, that when you get a rejection and saying, no, we don't want your work, or we don't like your story, or your story is not what we want to publish right now, you have to like realize that it has very little to do with what you've sent them. It has to do with what else they're publishing that season, what their budgets are. Oh my gosh, that you thought that dinosaurs were in, but dinosaurs are out this year, or and it has in like so you can write the very best story or have the very best portfolio, but you're still going to have constant rejection. And I still have that now. Like it's not like, oh, I've published books and now everybody just publishes me. I got rejected 3 times last week from different publishers, and I was in a funk. Nobody loves me. I'm never going to write a story ever again. And I had to call my writer friends and say, nobody's going to love me, and I'm never going to write again. And they said, yes, this is the process. Remember, Anne, you know, you'll think of something else, you'll find the right home for it, but it's a constant emotional roller coaster. It's like you're constantly on a job search, is what I tell people. Like, when you go and you interview and you get, it's an anxious process. You interview, then they like you and they call you back for the second interview, and then you call you for the third, or then they never return your call or they don't get back to you. And that's just constantly what being a freelance author and illustrator is. You're constantly trying to find work and opportunities, and for your stories to be told, and you're constantly being told no. So it's a horrible, horrible career if you'd like to make money. Oh, that's the problem too. It's not very lucrative. If you'd like to make money, choose a different career, like plumbing, electricians, again, careers that do not have starving as the descriptor. It's very so so it's a challenging field.
Right. Now, when you how old were you when you published your first book?
I was in my 20s. Those little cute books that I did for Right Light Judaica. That was a
Okay.
long time ago. Yeah.
And did you have a family? Like, was your family supportive? Were people, rooting you on? Were people?
I think my parents kept saying to me, have a B plan,
Right.
because but then I met my husband, and my husband went to law school and was going to be a lawyer. So then they were a little less worried. That's the
Right.
thing when you're, married to, I make jokes that my husband is a patron of the arts, because I'm able to do what I do because he's doing what he's doing.
Right. Right. So that affords you some flexibility in what choices you make.
Yeah, I mean,
And-
I could make choices based on projects that I am passionate about, enthusiastic about, and I could say no to projects that I don't want to take for one reason or another. So yeah, I'm very fortunate that way.
Okay.
I mean,
So,
I do make some money.
right.
It's just not, it's freelance and it's variable and it's challenging.
Right. So a lot of your books teach like these Torah values, and I wonder, how do you come up with, your audience is a pretty wide audience. I mean, PJ Library is like the most you could say is that it's Jewish, and then like after that you really can't, like, it's hard to say who your audience.
Right,
Right.
its goals is to get Jewish books into all kinds of Jewish families' houses. So they are going to go, they're not going to be like, and these are the 39 malachos. That's
Right.
not their
Right.
goal. Their goal
Right.
is to give children who are in interfaith homes, or children who don't go to Hebrew school even, or don't know an aleph from a bet. Their goal is to get into those homes and introduce them to, the taste of honey on the book, like the first days of Cheder, like that
Right.
was always a classic story. So that's what they're trying to do, to like just introduce and get Judaism as something that's in the house and being encountered. So that's very
Right.
different than, say, what Art Scroll's doing.
Right. So when you so I have two questions that have to do with, with this. Well, I have a bunch of questions, but one question that I have is like, I think that there's a subtlety that's needed, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a subtlety that's needed when you are writing a book that you're trying to teach a Jewish concept to, whether it's a halacha or it's a hashkafa, and but you don't want to shove it down anyone's throat. You want it to be subtle and playful and interesting. Have you found that balance to be a challenge?
I mean, it's challenging to, I mean, that's kind of saying like, is it challenging to write a good story? The answer is yes, it's very challenging, which is why it's so rewarding and worthwhile. Nobody, no matter how frum you are or how much you've been educated, enjoys being lectured to. That is
Right.
just not what we do for entertainment. We like being inspired, we like being engaged, we like being entertained, we like laughing. You know, even the rabbis in the Gemara started with a joke, right? That's like the classic pedagogical thing because it gets people's
Mm-hmm.
interest. So yes, it's very challenging and it's wonderful challenging. Like, how am I going to teach or how am I going to explain to people who don't ever encounter Rashi what Rashi is? Because even in the, you know, if I'm writing a story about Rashi, like, how do I explain that in a way that's understandable to a 5-year-old who doesn't really, 5-year-olds don't really learn Rashi yet.
Right.
Like they get it that first, second grade, they start to learn a little bit, but it's really an older kid's skill. So how do we say this guy's really important? And he really, really was. So how are we going to like bring that down to kid level? I mean, I picked that, but it goes to anything. How do you explain the essence of Shabbos without being all about the rules? So, okay, no winnowing. Like, okay, I wasn't going to winnow anyway. You know, like that's not the story of Shabbos. What's the story of Shabbos? The story of Shabbos is about family and about warmth and how can we do that in a way that really brings kids in? Oh, I know, we're gonna have a dog. The dog's gonna help us get ready for Shabbos. That's already more fun.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So and and that's what the Kayla and Kugel series is. It's like what and giving kids a sense of autonomy. So if you have the grown up in the book running around, you know, lecturing the kid, come on now, child, you should now turn off your lights and make your bed for the Sabbath. No one's going to want to read that. But if you make the kid the person in control, which is what I do in the Kayla and Kugel series. So Kayla is telling Kugel, her dog. So Kayla's telling the dog, Kugel, we don't need a menorah for the Shabbos table. We need Shabbat candles for the Shabbos table. You silly dog. Okay, but now the kid is, and they identify with the kid reader. A kid reader will identify with the kid character, and the kid character is now the one with authority and the one who's lecturing, if so to speak. Except they're
Right.
lecturing, so it still doesn't feel like a lecture because they're telling a
Right.
dog. So they, you know,
Yeah.
just like lots of different tools and devices of ways to make things fun, engaging, inviting, warm, and not preachy.
Right. Have you ever needed to consult with like your Rav about a specific book or a specific incident with a publisher, or anything along those lines in the course of like trying to balance, your Jewish values with this, this wider Jewish audience?
So I find that like I've often called my rabbis that I'm friendly with a lot, but not so much as in terms of balance because that I can kind of have a gut check on my own, but I really use them as experts. Like when I'm writing the book about Rashi, I'm calling Rabbi Torchiner, who's my local rabbi, and saying, "You really know Rashi. I know Rashi, but you know Rashi. You really are much more learned than I am, and you are really good friends with Rashi. Tell me about Rashi." And like, he'll be able to give me information and insights into the subject that just he's really good at, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because he's a rabbi and he spent a lot of time with Rashi. I did the same thing when I did the book Sarah Builds a School. Leslie Ginsburg Klein wrote her PhD on the Beis Yaakov movement. So she became my co-author even, but I wanted to consult with her because like she knows Sarah Schneer really well. She read her journals and her diaries and studied the whole movement and knew the context of the building of the schools and what the motivations were and what the challenges were because that was her PhD. So I find rabbis have PhDs in Judaism. So if I'm writing
Right.
about something Jewish, they're really, really good to consult with. They just know stuff.
Right.
And so if I'm doing something really simple like today, this book is about lighting Shabbos candles, I'm fairly confident I have the expertise in that. But if I'm writing, but if I'm writing about like, so I was again, I was thinking about writing this book about Rashi, and Rashi lived a really, really long time ago. Um, there's very little written about his life. So consulting with my rabbi was really helpful. I don't know if that book will go anywhere, but I'm having fun writing it. Um, or when Sarah Schneer was another great example. I'm trying to think. Then I have had to consult like a rabbi, like I was once contacted about illustrating Christmas cards for greeting cards. And I was like, can I do that? So I consulted with my Rav at the time, and the answer I got, which doesn't necessarily apply to whoever's listening, but applied to me at the moment, well, the answer I got from my rabbi, as long as it's like Santa Claus, it's fine, but Jesus, not so much, because for him and for the conversation he and I were having, red and green and candy canes and, gingerbread men, cookies is not particularly religious, but nativity scenes are very, very religious. So I made a couple of gingerbread men. It was just cookies. So, that's really the only like Shyla I've had.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so, so that's interesting. I appreciate that, reaching out to subject matter experts, because that's basically all I do.
Mhm.
But you know, is there anything from from the teachings of Tanakh, whether it be from Gedolim or whether it be from, your own household that you grew up in, that sort of influenced your wanting to be this sort of teacher to people who might be unaffiliated, or to children who are still learning the beauty of a lot of these Jewish concepts? Was there something that inspired you to go into this particular um, you know type of work?
I guess because I grew up, it's an interesting question, and I haven't really thought about it. You're making me think of good things. Um, so I grew up, my dad was a rabbi of a conservative shul, and we were always Orthodox, but every Shabbat, and I was sent to day school for school. And we were always Shomer Shabbos and Shomer Kashrus, but every Shabbos I was in a shul that did not have a mechitza, read a lot of stuff in English, um, that kind of thing. And I think because I grew up in that environment and on Shabbos and was in Orthodox schools during the week, I like got this perspective of there's different kinds of Jewish people, and they're all people and they're all nice. And they all are just coming from their own particular point of view. So I kind of like had connection and compassion for, or understanding. I just had an understanding of there are lots of different kinds of Jews, and they're all who they are. Ooh, I don't know
Right.
what just Zoom. Okay.
No,
Mhm.
yeah,
Uh,
that's beautiful. No, I like that. I think that where we come from definitely influences, how we view like Kiruv, Rechokim, and Kriv program, even because we're talking about like little. I mean, my kids read Ping Pong Shabbat, and we thought it was cute, and we enjoyed it, and I read it to them. So I think that but it says something that is the genre that you chose to go into. I think that is indicative of more of like looking out for the group, rather than just thinking about, you know, your niche art audience that you're gonna get to. This is like thinking about a lot of. I think there's something really beautiful about this style of writing for this purpose of sort of taking taking a concept, the Jewish concept, and bringing it down to its most fundamental feelings and actions, and finding like a joy and inspiration in that. So I think that's beautiful, and it sounds like you got an opportunity when you were growing up to see all different types of Jews. Now, let me ask you a question. When you are writing a story, um, I think you mentioned to me before we turned the recorder, the record button on, that you have, a storyline that you're working on, and you have ideas, and you have arcs, and you have, what it sounds like you have a pretty complicated way of pulling a story together. Can you tell us more about that process?
Oh, I'd love to. Of course, every story, like I wish it was just a process because every story has a different process, which makes it more interesting. But everything happens in a different way because it's unique to itself. So it's not like I could say, it's not like a machine and like you put in the idea and then it goes, and it's not like, what do they call those? A Rube Goldberg machine. Like they pull the crank and then it turns and then you go to this and then you go to that because it's not that easy.
Right.
It's not that clear. I can tell you the stories behind some of my books to illustrate that. Like, for example, there was usually a story starts with something that I care about. And when I say care, it can mean something that I love and that I'm passionate in a positive way. It could also start with something that makes me angry and I want to fix. And I decide that I'm going to fix it by writing a children's book because children's books always fix everything. So, like, for example, something that I love is I love my children. I really like them a lot, actually. And my kids I just noticed when now they're all taller than me. They grew. But
Yes, I have that problem too.
yeah, it happens. Uh,
Mhm.
but when my daughter was very young, she used to play with this tea set, and she would set up the tea sets and put all the saucers on the cups, and then she would undo the tea set, and then she would do it again. Like setting the table was great fun for some reason. And I loved her very much, and I was observing this. I said, aha, setting the table is fun. How about we set the table for Shabbat? If we set the table for Shabbat, then we could teach about Shabbat. And that was the first Kayla and Kugel book, which is Kayla and her dog Kugel setting the table for Shabbat.
Oh,
So that is how that idea came. That's like a loving source. An angry source is I got very upset when in my neighborhood there was way back before COVID, there was this thing called measles. And when there was measles, there were measles vaccines, and there still are, of course. But there was a family in my neighborhood that wanted to not vaccinate, and the school was insisting they vaccinated, and they sued the school. How dare you must accept our children, and we are not going to vaccinate. And the argument they made was that the Torah says "v'chai bahem," and "v'chai bahem" means we should not vaccinate. And I was like, hold on a second. That's not what V'chai Bahem means, and you certainly shouldn't be suing my school over it. So that made me upset. So I was upset, so I wrote Judah Maccabee Goes to the Doctor. And it's a story about a book about a boy who is very scared to get a shot. And he overcomes his fear because he knows if he gets a shot, it will protect his younger sister who's too young to get a shot. And that's a way that he can help her. And then I get to at the end say this whole thing about how protecting our health is a very important Jewish value. So that came from a place of, I didn't like what was happening. And therefore I wrote this children's book. So it could really come from all sorts of places.
right.
Um, but
So,
that's, yes, I'm sorry, yes.
do you have like a favorite? Like, I
Oh,
feel like
no.
like, is there a book that you're like particularly proud of? You
I
know,
love all my children.
go ahead.
No, I'm really, really, I mean, it depends also what mood I'm in. Did I have chocolate this morning or did I have coffee this morning? Depending on my mood, if it's the summertime, I'll say Noah Swimathon is something I'm really proud of. But if it's, I'm talking to, I don't know, a teacher, a high school teacher who teaches girls, I'll be like, I wrote about Sarah Schneera because that's going to really connect to her.
Right.
There's different, I'm just proud of, I really am proud of everything I've done for different reasons. Like the reason I wrote it is because it's something I care about and can talk endlessly about, probably ad nauseum, which is why I wrote a book about it. And so I really like what I did. I mean,
Right.
except for it's the dark, when you have the dark night of the soul and you say, "Oh no, everything I've done is terrible."
Right.
And
Well, we have to have some sort of sense of value because obviously Hashem gave us a gift. We can't just poo-poo that away. We have to say, Hashem gave this gift to me, and I'm going to appreciate it for what it is. And so to say, it's almost like a slap in Hashem's face,
right,
in my opinion. And this
that's
might
a
not be a
beautiful
pop,
way. That's a
some,
beautiful way to think about it. But you still get into this funky places. I mean, I think it's also part of being an artist and a writer. Again, like when you're an accountant and you do your spreadsheets, it comes out to the right numbers and you know you've done a good job. And I did it. My spreadsheet has all worked out. And it's very tangible. When you write a story or you draw a picture, it's very hard to measure success. Is it a good
Mhm.
drawing? Some people like it, some people don't like it. Some people are telling me they like it, but they really don't like it. They're just trying to be nice to me. Like, so it's very hard to know, did I do a good job? So it's just like part of the artistic process to be comfortable in a place of insecurity
Right.
is very uncomfortable.
I
It's like
have to be
I'm
on.
gonna do,
I have to be
I'm gonna do a
honest with
metaphor. It's like the
you. Okay.
fiddler on the roof. The
Okay.
fiddler on the roof is playing his tune, but he is never stable.
Mm. I I'm not sure I know what you're talking about because
Oh,
I don't know if I know Fiddler on the Roof well enough.
oh,
Um,
it's just an image from the movie. He's just
okay,
playing, it's a fiddler on the roof, and he's
right.
playing fiddle, and he's sitting on a roof. He's not stable, and it's supposed to
Mm.
be a metaphor for the precariousness of the Jewish people. We
Oh, okay.
we play out our little tune. I'm not quoting the movie well, but it's something like the Jewish people, we play out our little tune, never knowing what will come next, kind of thing. So
Okay.
there's inherent instability in being Jewish, which we could go really deep on that if we'd like. And there's inherent instability in being an artist. And you have to like get used to being uncomfortable in order to do it.
Okay. So is there any current projects that you're working on right now?
Oh goodness, yes. I'm working on Kayla and Kugel Rosh Hashanah, the next one. Kayla and Kugel Purim is coming out for this Purim. I'm working on some board books. I've got an elephant who's going to learn to blow the shofar, and that's going to be really fun. And I'm just kind of proud of that because something about an elephant, because they blow noises from their trunk, seems
Yeah.
like seems like they would connect to a chauffeur.
Yeah. That's an,
So,
yeah.
I think that's just like kind of a funny play on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so lots of different fun things.
Okay. Are you working with anybody else like you did with Sarah Schneer?
Am I collaborating with anybody? Not at the moment. I'm trying to
Okay.
think if I'm doing any. No, the chauffeur book, I'm the author illustrator. What else did I just say?
The
Oh,
elephant.
I wrote a book about Mel Brooks, and that's going to be illustrated by somebody else. So I guess we could call that a collaboration because it's a different illustrator. But I don't know who that's going to be yet. The publisher is still looking.
So
So
is
that's
there an so I know that Mel Brooks was like an actor and a comedian.
Mhm.
I don't know his works necessarily, but is there like an audience for the, illustrated books about Mel Brooks?
Well, we're certainly going to find out. Um, Mel Brooks is still alive, which is amazing. He's 98 years old. He did a lot of movies that Blazing Saddles that used a lot of Jewish humor in them. One of his classic ones is that Moses comes and he does a bit about the Spanish Inquisition in song, which, believe it or not, is hysterical. He does, like, he has this bit about Moses coming down from Har Sinai. Hiya, Moses, to the 15. And then he drops one tablet, 10 commandments, because the other five broke. I'm not doing it justice. He's much funnier than I am. Um, but I think just like I distill Shabbos from the 39 Malachos into something that's kid friendly, I'm taking Mel Brooks's life story. He did a lot of jokes that made fun of Hitler. He did a lot of jokes that made fun of racism. He did a lot of jokes that made fun of bullies of all kinds. So I'm kind of distilling in that telling a story about how you use humor to overcome difficult things. So it's not really a story about Mel Brooks. Now it's a story about how do we handle it when we have to deal with hard stuff. And one of the ways is with laughter. And that's kind of what the picture book's going to be about. It's going to be the underlying theme.
See that now that you're saying that should be very interesting. Did you come up with that? Like, is he someone that you're particularly um you know you look up to, or somebody told you like, oh, you should look into this? Like, how did
I came up with it because I think I read an article about his life on his 95th birthday. Somebody was doing oh my gosh, Mel Brooks is 95, happy birthday. Um, and then when you read about him, and he does have a line, he in the 1960s, he made a movie called The Producers. Um, and the premise of that movie is complicated. The premise
yeah,
of the movie is complicated, but in the movie, oh, sorry, my phone went off. I just turned it off. I apologize. The premise of the movie, The Producers, inside that movie, for some reason, which would be too complicated to explain, they have a musical about Hitler. And it's really funny, which you wouldn't think, but he was very good
no,
at what
yeah,
and he, in the 1960s, people would criticize him, and he said, Hitler, you can't make a comedy about Hitler. That's really, really not nice. Hitler is too evil to be funny. And his answer to them at the time was, that's exactly why we have to make fun of Hitler, because if we make fun of him, then we win. So and I just was very struck by that approach. Um, and I kind of wanted to like expand on that.
right. Wow, that's really interesting. I haven't heard that, so it's a little bit before my time. Um,
Well, you
but
can look up Blazing Saddles.
okay,
Got got to research the classics.
yep. So now I know that when was the last time when was the last time a book came out? Did you publish anything? Um, you said you have a bunch of things that are coming out, but those I imagine have been in the works for a while.
Well, Ping Pong Shabbat is coming out on September 10th of this year. So that's in I don't know when this is airing, but from when we're speaking, that's in about 2, 3 weeks.
Mhm.
So that's the newest thing coming.
Right.
So
Okay.
I'm not sure what else.
Well, I'm saying not when is it coming, but I mean, how long? Like, when did you write it?
I wrote it 2 years ago.
Right.
How long it takes. It's a
Nice.
very, very long process. And it's actually kind of funny. Not funny, haha, but it's a funny something. In the book, at the back of the book is about ping pong champion Esty Ackerman. Esty, when
Mhm.
she was 11 years old, um, had a dilemma. She was really, really excellent ping pong player. And she lives in my neighborhood and goes to my shul, which is how I knew the story. And she, at 11 years old, got all the way to the top of the nationals tennis table competition And the gold medal match, she was supposed to face a boy and play him. And if she won, she would have won the gold medal, but it was scheduled for Shabbos. And so she had, at 11 years old, do I play ping pong or do I and compete in this match and maybe win the gold medal, or do I go home and have Shabbos with my family? And that's what the story is about. When I interviewed Esty, she was a student at Stern College and she was 20. And so in the back of the book, it says, where is Esty now? And it says, oh, Esty is a senior at Stern College for Women. And, and she plays ping pong on the student team. And this is where Esty is now. And now the book is out and Esty graduated from Stern last year. So it's already old news that she's no longer a student. So the bio is a little bit behind, but that's okay. It was true when I wrote it.
Right. So it sounds like you get a lot of joy from writing, and this sounds like something you're really passionate about. So I really admire that. I think just myself finding a hobby, and I'm already in my mid whatevers, and it's not so simple to follow the path that you're passionate about and go with that. That's really special. Now I do want to bring up something that we discussed before, which is you let me know that you actually lost your 18-year-old daughter in a tragic car accident about a year and a half ago. And so
Yeah, really bad.
yeah, and so the reason I bring it up is because I wonder what that does to the creative process, to the ability to produce these happy, lovely little books, and to sort of have this whole you're a starving artist, but you're not like a depressed artist. You're someone who is bringing up all this joy, and when you have that much grief, how does that affect your writing process? How does that affect your creative process? How does that affect your ability to produce?
So it's interesting just to connect it to the question you had a minute ago. When I wrote the Ping Pong Shabbat book, at the end they have your bio. And in my bio, it says Shabbat is Anne's favorite day of the week. But right now, what's changed and is no longer correct that Shabbat is my favorite day of the week, because now Shabbat is a very quiet, non-distracted time, which is why I used to love it. But now a non-distracted time means it's a time where I can focus on grief. So that's a very hard day now, actually. There's no Wordle and there's no computers and there's no distractions. It's quiet. That's the point of Shabbos. And in the quiet is where you think, boredom is the best producer of ideas, right? When it's
Right.
quiet, you think, and you're either you're thinking about the things you love, or you're thinking about the things that you're angry about, or you're thinking about what you care about. And right now, the grief is taking up a lot of that real estate in my head. So generating that first part of the process, generating ideas, is a little stymied more than it used to be in the past. It was never easy. It was always hard to come up with ideas. It's like the hardest part about writing, because the whole point is you have to come up with something that you've never come up with before. So it's not like you can go and find an idea and just do it again. You have to start fresh. So it's very hard with the grief taking up the real estate. It's hard to find that place for ideas. Fortunately, like I told you when we talked before, I had a folder of ideas before she passed away that, I would have an idea and I put it in the folder, and I have an idea and I put it in the folder. So now I'm just I feel like I'm stealing from myself, or I'm stealing from my past self, because now I'm a different person, but I still have all those old ideas that the past self came up with, and I can still take those ideas and develop them and work them. Those I'm able to do. So fortunately, I got a nice folder to draw from, and hopefully I will, well, we'll see what happens after I'm done with the folder.
Right.
Yeah, I'll
Well,
keep you posted.
keep me posted. Part two.
Yeah.
Um, I think that uh, you know, understanding not at all what you're going through, but understanding that the worst part about grief is that everybody else continues their day and you still need to get dinner on the table and you still need to, pay your bills and you still need to just stop at a red light. Like so
You
many.
still need you still need to come onto good podcasts and talk about books.
Right, right. You still need to market yourself and
Mhm.
there's this continuation of life that happens that is almost the opposite of grief. It's like it doesn't make any sense and it feels I till this day, I mean, my mother passed away 4 years ago. And until this day, I have this in the back of my head, like, these people don't know that my mother is dead, like,
Yeah.
like I'm too young to have a dead mother, and obviously that's ludicrous, but it's the way that I feel that and even for myself, like I stopped taking pictures. I used to take pictures all the time. And that was a very large creative outlet that I had. And I was also doing it to document what I was doing and to let my mother live vicariously through me. And I stopped taking pictures. Like I'm embarrassed. I don't have pictures of my family anymore. And my kids are like, why don't you take pictures? It's like it's hard to explain. My creativeness around this issue has waned a little bit. But I hope one day to get that back. Also, the selfie culture annoys me to no end. So
Yeah. Pictures
I'm
have
like,
become a whole different experience than they used to be. But you
right,
know what?
right,
You may not, and that's okay. Like it's like we are both irrevocably changed by something big that happened.
right,
Of course we are.
right,
So it's okay if we're okay. It's not okay. We are never going to be the people that we were. The
right,
question is if we're going to be next. So if that means
right,
you take pictures, then great. If that means
right.
you throw yourself into doing really cool podcasts with fascinating people like me, haha,
Yes.
um, and then that's your new tough kid or whatever. But
Yes.
we're not going back. We're
Right.
just
We're
going
not going
forward.
back.
So
Right.
I don't know. That's why I say I don't know what's going to happen when I run out of the folder. Eventually, there will be no content in there. It's going to be a while. I got a lot of stuff in there, but
Right.
but but maybe I do more collaborations, and the ideas come from my collaborators, or maybe I someday write the Shiva book for young children, which sounds horrible, and not appealing at all right now. But maybe it will to me when I've processed this more. I really don't know. I don't know who
Right.
I will. I don't know what I will care about next. I just know
Right.
what I care about right now. So we'll find out.
Right. So and with that, I want to thank you so much for your time, and I
Thank
want
you.
to give you a
Thank you for
bracha.
your like. Thank you. Okay,
My
I'll take.
bracha, my bracha to you is not that I have that much power. It's not my birthday, and I'm not a Rebbitzin, but
I think
my
brachas
my
count.
any brachas count. My bracha to you is that you should continue to um you should first of all you should have nachama that Hashem should comfort you, and
Amen.
that you eventually come to a place where you're different, but you mesh sort of those two realities, the grief-stricken parent with the person who has this desire and creativity to share, the beauty of what we have, that is, inherently uh difficult, especially nowadays with all the anti-Semitism and everything. Like this is a time for, connecting to our roots and making ourselves stronger. And I think that your books definitely help people feel pride in their Yiddishkeit or in their religion. And that should be an aliyah for your daughter.
Thank you.
And I hope that we'll talk more. And I'm going to take you up on a coffee if I ever make it out to Highland, New Jersey, you know?
Except that I'm in West Hampton, Long Island, but yes.
Oh, yeah, except for that. Didn't you say Highland at the beginning of the podcast? Okay,
I
whatever.
never said Highland, but don't worry about it.
Okay.
I have
All
a
right.
really good friend in Highland Park. You could go see her.
West Hempstead. If I
Yeah.
come out to West Hempstead, I'm gonna
And you're in
look you up.
Baltimore, right?
I'm
All right, I'll end
cool.
up there. My grandmother lived in Baltimore for many, many years, so it's my ancestral homeland.
It's the motherland.
There you go. I just
All right.
before we go, I just want to thank you for your compassion. This was a
Oh,
really positive, warm, um, comforting conversation, and I really appreciate
oh,
it.
oh, thank you so much. I really
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
it. Okay. We'll be in touch then. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, be well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The views of the host do not necessarily equate the views of the guests or vice versa. This podcast is not intended to act as a clinical diagnosis or an authoritative halachic source. Any questions regarding treatment should be directed to your clinician, and any halachic questions should be addressed to your local Orthodox rabbi. We also encourage you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and rate our podcast on iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Your support helps increase visibility and allows us to reach more listeners who can benefit from our wonderful guest speakers.
This is Rabbi Ben-Zion Schaefer of the Shmooze.com. Jewish adulting is about shining a light on parts of ourselves in order to do Avodas Hashem with all the tools and resources at our disposal. It is an honor and a privilege to have every day to further refine our character and grow closer to Hashem. Take advantage of these opportunities before it's too late.